I've been asked, how did I start telling stories? And where did I learn to tell stories? And that's kind of a funny story. To go all the way back, I was raised on a ranch in Idaho. Now, I was not raised as a Christian. I grew up with horses, I grew up with cows. My dad was a salty old ranch cowboy. And neither one of us were really long on dialogue and vocabulary. So we learned to describe things the way we saw them. I'll leave you to figure out the rest of the story. So that's how I learned to talk. Now, there's still a little bit of that ranch cowboy still in me, a little rough around the edges. But along the way, somehow, I grew to love stories. I love a good story. When I was a teenager in high school, believe it or not, I loved to listen to Paul Harvey's news and comment and his rest of the story. That just wrapped me in and pulled me. I could listen to him for hours. I don't know why, but I guess you could say I learned to tell stories by listening to Paul Harvey. Well, as the years went on, I became a Christian. I became a Latter-day Saint. And then, by a strange twist of fate, I found myself teaching seminary and institute for the church. And I discovered that for me, as I went to firesides, those people who could tell a story could teach me, and I could listen to them for hours. Well, I found that in my own teaching, if I could tell a story about the events that I was trying to convey. For example, I'm teaching New Testament. I learned early on as a teacher that if I would master the material, if I would memorize it, as it were, so that I knew the story backwards and forwards, and then I would go into the class and I would just tell the story, that worked. If I tried to follow lesson plans, that was as boring as watching paint dry. But if I could tell the story of the scriptures, my students were interested. I was interested. Well, that's how the stories got started. One day, I'm teaching a Sunday school class, a gospel doctrine class, and there happened to be a fellow in that class who worked for a local radio station. He asked me if I would be interested in telling stories on the radio. I thought that was the craziest thing I'd ever heard. I really didn't take him seriously, and the subject was kind of dropped. About a year later, he asked me again. Oh, sure, why not? I didn't think it would go anywhere. But we went down to the radio station, and he stuffed me in a broom closet, as it were, with a microphone, and I read the story. He took those stories, we did 3 of them that day, I think. He took them to the radio station management, and they loved it. They asked me to produce 3 stories a week with Carl's help, Carl Watkins, and put them on the radio. I got to tell you, when that first started, I was scared to death, because here I was telling all the world these stories about how to live and the kind of person I thought, I can't do this. I'd be the world's biggest hypocrite. But I was persuaded to do it. That was 20 plus years ago when I started doing that. Now that's how it started. Since then, I think we've produced somewhere between 500 and 750 stories. They've all been set to music. Many of them have been put on the radio. It turned into more things like television, and that's a story I'll tell you later. But that's the origins. I'm a storyteller. But along the way, I learned, don't make the story up. The story has to be true, and every story contains a true principle. Every story is intended to help someone. I hope they help you. Thanks.